This is the video for the blog that's going to be posted on February 19th, 2018. This is a continuation of the Chronological Bible series, Episode 7, the Tabernacle. The passages for this week came out of Exodus chapters 35 through 40, and then also Numbers chapters 7 through 9 and Leviticus 1 through 8. All of those passages really focus on the tabernacle, the use of the tabernacle, and what the elements were supposed to look like and how they were constructed and assembled and all of that. So I just want to take some time to go through that. I'm doing a little bit of a different video, different camera, different audio today. This is just kind of being put together in a little bit of a hurry. I had to spend a little bit of time today working on my furnace, which went out in our house, and it was the thermocouple, and I just had to spend some time getting in there. The furnace is in the crawl space, so it was not real easy to get to, and then the thermocouple itself was also not very easy to get to, so it took a little bit of extra time. So I have that done. Our house is going up on the market this week, so just keep tabs on that. Keep following along on watchmakerspolls.com to get updates on our downsizing and getting ready for our next phase in our adventure. Anyway, just looking at the elements of the tabernacle, what I want to do is go through and just talk a little bit about what the tabernacle was all about. It was really intended to be a means with which God could dwell, or symbolized his dwelling amongst the Israelites, amongst his people. And so God was very specific in the way that he put the instructions for the tabernacle together. In fact, we read at least a couple of times in Exodus chapter 25, verse 40, God told Moses, he said, "See that you make the elements of the tabernacle, the pieces of it, after the pattern for them, which is being shown you on the mountain." This is at the time when God had Moses come up on the mountain to give him some of the additional requirements and laws that he did. And then in the very next chapter, in Exodus 26, verse 30, God tells him, says, "You shall erect the tabernacle according to the plan for it that you were shown on the mountains." The tabernacle was actually shown visibly. It was like there was an illustration given to Moses of exactly what this is supposed to look like. And the tabernacle actually represents in its parts the throne room of heaven, the way that God is kind of depicts himself for in the visions that he gives his people as far as how he is enthroned in heaven. So we're going to go through and just look at that. The sequence of the instructions in the Bible starts with the focal point, the central piece of the tabernacle, which was the Ark of the Covenant, and then it progresses outwards from that. But I'm going to actually talk about it in reverse order and just kind of describe something about the layout and the elements and a little bit about their use and what they mean. So the tabernacle itself was intended to be a portable structure, something that the Israelites could set up and tear down relatively quickly. In fact, God, if you remember last week, I talked about God leading them through a pillar of cloud or fire, depending on the day or night, across the desert. And so when this pillar would move, that would be the signal that they were supposed to break camp. And so the tabernacle would have to be torn down and all parts carried until the pillar stopped and they reset up their camp someplace. So it was intended to be portable. And God designated the Levites to do the work of tearing down, setting up, and operating the various pieces and functions of the tabernacle. In fact, in Numbers chapter 8, which was part of the readings for this week, God says this. He says, "For all the firstborn among the people of Israel are mine, both of man and of beast. On the day that I struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I consecrated them for myself. And I have taken the Levites instead of all the firstborn among the people of Israel." So what God was saying is that all of your firstborn people are mine, but yet I'm going to actually take the Levites instead of them and let the Levites be the representatives of me to you and you to me, to be kind of the mediators or the people who are set apart. That's what consecrated means. They were set apart to do the work of God. So the Levites were the ones who were put in charge of all the pieces of the tabernacle. So the tabernacle itself actually started out with a ring, a perimeter fence, if you will. It was posts with curtains hanging from them that stretched so that the rectangle, the long part of the long axis of the rectangle, stretched from west to east, and the entrance to that courtyard was on the east end of that. And the idea would be that as you approach this tabernacle, if this represents the dwelling of God, you would approach it from the east, going toward the west, so your back would be to the sun. And this was significant in the sense that a lot of the pagan cultures and worshippers of pagan gods would often worship the sun, and they put a lot of significance on the sunrise and the origin of the sun and what the sun was and all that. And so by having the Israelites turn their back on that, it was a way of saying to them, you're turning your back on these pagan practices, and whenever you come to approach me. And so that was important. So then you come in, and the Israelites would actually approach the gate or the entrance to the courtyard, and they would be met there by some of the Levite priests who would then take the offerings that the Israelites would be bringing. And I'll talk about the offerings next week, but they would then go through all of the procedures with the offerings, and then the Levites would then take care of transporting the offerings into the courtyard and then offering that to God and so forth. So you had this perimeter courtyard that was set up. And then on the inside of that, the first thing that you would come to as you cross that courtyard going from east to west would be the bronze altar. It was a big square altar that was the altar was actually made out of wood, but then it was covered over with bronze, and the altar was actually had a grate on the inside of it that was used to support the sacrifices. So whenever the Israelites would bring a bull or a calf or a goat or whatever, and the animal would be slaughtered and placed in this altar for burning, the rack or the grate there would support that and allow it to burn, and then the ashes fall through and collect underneath. And so they had the big altar on which the sacrifices were offered. And then as you proceed even further westward from the altar, you come to a round basin, a bowl, a fairly sizable bowl, that was intended to hold water and was a point of cleansing, a place where the priests could wash their hands, wash their feet in preparation for entering the actual tent, which was really the central, the focal point at the western end of the tabernacle complex. And so they would cleanse themselves in this basin. Then the tent itself, which is uh, it's called the tent of meeting of the tabernacle. It has a curtain, and only the priests would be able to go into that. So the priests were actually the descendants of Aaron. They were Levites, but they were specifically of Aaron's lineage. Aaron, of course, is the brother of Moses. So the priest would then go into the tent, and the tent had three elements, three pieces of furniture inside of it. Then it had a curtain over on the far wall, the western wall of that inner chamber. Now, this chamber was called the holy place. And so in this chamber on the south side was the lampstand, similar to what it's the menorah, is that seven-armed candle or light that you may be familiar with. The lamp was actually made out of gold and was hammered and shaped out of gold, and it had cups in it that were shaped in the form of blossoms and so forth, and that held the oil that would burn, and those cups were designed to shine their light onto the floor out in front of the lampstand, so towards the north there of the tabernacle tent. And so then on the opposite wall, on the north wall, opposite of the opposite of the lampstand, was the table on which bread was placed, and this table had the stipulation was that it had to contain bread constantly, and so bread was replaced every day, and this bread was supposed to signify or represent fellowship with God. It would sort of be representing a meal, and so when you fellowship with someone, you oftentimes will share a meal with them, and so it represented the ability of the priests of the people to come before God and actually commune with Him and be in fellowship with Him. And then on the western side of this holy place, this chamber, the tent, was it was a smaller altar called the altar of incense, in which incense would be burned, and this incense had a very specific formula that God had specified. And He said, use this formula for the sweet-smelling, fragrant offering, and don't use that formula for anything else that you do. It's set aside. It's holy, specifically and only for the worship activities that you would do in the tabernacle. So the incense, as it would burn, that was supposed to be kept burning as well all the time. And the purpose of the incense, or the significance, was to represent the prayers or the offerings of people going up to God. And then, so you had those three objects out in the holy place, and then you had this curtain that was woven very beautiful, had pictures of cherubim on it and so forth. But the curtain then separated the holy place from the most holy place, or the place called the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies was one piece of furniture, one thing only, and that was the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant specifically was a box that had a solid gold lid on it, and the gold lid had mounted on it, and all part of that one piece were two cherubim who had their arms outstretched over it, and they were looking down on the lid. And the lid was actually called the atonement cover, and it was supposed to represent God's throne. It was supposed to represent the fact that God is surrounded by these cherubim, and they have their arms outstretched or their wings outstretched in honor to God, and God would situate there in that throne room. And again, it was not really the throne room, of course, of God, but it was a representation of that. And actually, Moses, the scripture tells us that when Moses would go and speak with God, that he would hear the voice of God actually coming out of that space there on the atonement cover. Well, the box itself, the Ark of the Covenant, was actually supposed to contain three things. It had the tablets that had the Ten Commandments on it, and this represented the covenant relationship between God and His people. And then it also had a jar filled with manna that God had instructed them to put in there for future generations, just to remember the provision that God made for the people to provide them with food and bread while they were in the desert. And then it also had a portion of Aaron's staff, the staff that he used whenever they were performing the miracles there and the plagues in Egypt. But this staff also became significant, and we'll discuss this in a few weeks. But there was a point in time when that staff became significant and actually sprouted and budded, started growing again, to signify that God had specifically chosen Aaron as the high priest, as the person who was his representative for the people. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So the tablets and the jar of manna and the section of Aaron's staff are the three contents that were in the Ark of the Covenant. The main thing I want to get out of this that I feel like is really interesting as you go through and study about the elements, the pieces of the tabernacle, I encourage you to look at some of the additional resources that I put in my blog. But one of the takeaways I really want to emphasize in this is simply that God expects us to come to Him on His terms. We don't get to pick and choose the way that we want to approach Him and how we're going to deal with Him and what we're going to do. He is very specific in what He expects of His people. And, we're not able to fully live up to His expectations, to His 10 Commandments. That's why we are saved by grace, not by works, not by anything that we do, But the fact of the matter is, God, time and time again throughout Scripture, tells his people, I want you to be holy just as I am holy. God, his expectation for us is very, very high. And it is incumbent upon us to come to him on his terms, not on our terms. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And like and subscribe this video. Make sure that you check out, continue to watch and follow watchmakerspulse.com. If you haven't signed up for the emails on that, I encourage you to do that. You'll be able to get updates as we progress forward in our upcoming adventure. Our house does go on the market this week, so we're praying that it will sell very quickly. And once that happens, then we're going to start being able to get our motorhome packed and ready to go and get our furniture loaded up and everything that we're going to take care of as we head out on our big adventure. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.